So, as we kick off, first and foremost, just a little bit about Unified before we jump in, if you're not familiar with us. We're really focused on one main thing at the end of the day as a company, and that's providing global brands and agencies enriched, transparent intelligence, and we'll probably touch on all three of those components throughout the day, and social advertising expertise on over $1 billion in social investments. We have access to all of the big six social platforms with direct APIs to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Pinterest, and Snapchat. We're certainly proud of that and the innovation we've built on top of it. But enough about us. Let's dive into the topic at hand today. And what we're doing is presenting the culmination of a research piece that Brand Innovators, a study group out there, did. And really, we wanted to ask the question, for what we see, is 2017 the tipping point for business intelligence in social advertising? And to really answer that, we obviously wanted to bring a specific poll to certain people. So the methodology behind that was really surveying hundreds of different digital marketers across different Fortune 500 brands and their major agency partners. The very recent study was conducted in December of last year, and you can see a very healthy breakdown of directors, C-level, managers. 44% of people had been at their companies for over 5 years, 48% had been in their disciplines for over 10 years. So we really wanted to take the pulse of people who had been feeling these pains for a long time, who had been ingrained into certain institutions, and obviously who had a wide range of purviews into their problems, whether they be a CMO or a marketing manager. So let's dig in. First, let's talk about the top data challenges facing social advertisers today. And social advertisers certainly do not have it easy in an ever-growing landscape that is social media. So we wanted to identify, what are the biggest issues facing them? And interestingly enough, more than a half of respondents agreed that their social advertising data was quote-unquote a kludge. So kind of just a singular way of saying it was super labor-intensive and could be very error-prone when you're trying to stitch together countless numbers of spreadsheets or different data ports or dealing with different silos of data you're trying to bring together. And social advertisers, they really continue to face these series of challenges that prohibit them from making the most of their ever-growing data exhaust. And data exhaust is a topic we'll touch on a lot today. And the word exhaust is certainly there by no accident. Marketers feel like they basically have a huge exhaust of data coming not only off of their campaigns, but every single component that is measurable across their social advertising. So if half of marketers are feeling like, oh man, my data is labor intensive and error prone, what does that lead to? Well, a lot of challenges here. First and foremost, 29% of respondents said, hey, look, I know data is indeed better, right? But more than a third of them say they struggle to tap into the power of that data. And what that basically means is they're having trouble distilling that massive data exhaust that we just talked about into actionable insights, right? How can I actually take this heaping mound of data and use it and make it actionable for my day-to-day life? Beyond value left on the table, there was certainly a growing trend for enrichment and a big void in the marketplace for that. And almost 40% of people saying that they have no capability at all to normalize or enrich the social data that they're taking in to make it usable. That's super important in social, specifically as a channel where each individual social network is the quote-unquote walled garden, right? So Facebook has its own unique metrics, unique measurement capabilities, you name it. That's completely different from Twitter, which is completely different from Snapchat, which is completely different from Pinterest. So having no ability to normalize and enrich that data across all of those channels makes it really difficult for marketers to tap into the usability. And lastly, there was really a lack of expert resources that we identified. And what that means is, if a business intelligence tool could help alleviate some of these issues, a lot of people internally feel like they don't have the technical resources to be able to either build something from scratch or implement something themselves. It's a very new problem, so it's not like there's a person inside of the walls of an organization who's been dealing with it for a decade. And a lot of times they are reliant upon outside parties to come in and help them untangle this mess. So what is causing this? What is really the specific main culprit behind all of these different challenges that people are facing in their data? And really the culprit is buying fragmentation. So let's explore what exactly buying fragmentation means. First and foremost, we're seeing for those types of marketers who are self-service marketers, right? They're running their own campaigns, they're logging into their own tools. On average, 1 in 3 of those types of marketers leverage between 4 and 10 different buying or activation tools for their brands. No longer is one person using one thing in the days when it was much simpler. Really, 4 to 10 is a lot of different tools to juggle. So what that means is I'm using not only just a tool for Facebook and a tool for Twitter and a tool for Snapchat, which are all very different and all have different data sets, different silos of data that I then have to stitch together. But a lot of times what we're seeing is even if you're just say a Facebook marketer, you're using lots of different tools inside of Facebook. For half of your campaigns, you may be using the Facebook Power Editor because it's free and very strong. For 25%, you may need to tap into this other tool that does weather optimization. And for your other 25%, you have to use this other tool because it does TV syncing, right? And because all of these different tools are now specializing in certain different niche offerings, marketers are faced with having to plug in lots of different them. And each of them creates their own unique data silo, which is no good for visibility from the top. Even when you flip the script over to managed service partners, 1 in 4 are still using between 4 and 10 different activation partners. So even those who aren't using self-service tools are still facing the same trend where they're tapping into multiple managed service solutions and partners to be able to capitalize on the niche offerings out there in market. And what's the vacuum that's been created is really no central command center to manage all of these different tools that marketers are forced to juggle. Now, we touched on data silos. What does that really mean? Each of those fragmented buying tools essentially has their own data silo connected to it. And so each silo is basically one subset of the total story that a marketer is trying to tell. It is just the performance from just the campaigns run on just that individual tool. And that's no good because when you have data silos that aren't connected, that aren't normalized and aren't enriched, you have what you have here in this stat, where almost 60% of people saying that they have no single view from the top, which is a very important view to have, across their entire brand portfolio, right? And that's obviously super important for them to make critical business decisions to be able to really impact ROI. So, we talked a lot about problems and talked about culprits. Let's start focusing on the solution. And the solution here really starts with transparency, which is a growing hot topic in the industry, and rightfully so. Without transparency, there's no way to make informed, intelligent decisions about what will actually help your marketing. And the way that we like to think about transparency is not a glimpse into something. That certainly is not nearly enough, but it's a holistic view at any level you might want to dive into. So think about it this way. Let's say we're talking about a house. We're not talking about social advertising. Transparency is not me walking up on the lawn, looking through a window and saying, what a nice room I can see into that house. And I think I can see another room, maybe a corner of it. I'd be guessing on square footage. I'd be guessing on the rest of the house. That's not really helpful. So transparency is not a bigger window or an open door so you can see more. Transparency is the blueprints to that house, so that you can see exactly the square footage, the exact layout, the exact schematics of everything that went in there, so that you can make informed decisions about that house. Social marketing is no different. Marketers certainly need that level of transparency at their fingertips, so that they can either see a view from the top or drill individually into a specific line item. So there's different types of transparency needs out there. Let's talk about them. First and foremost, spend transparency. This was a big issue that resonated in our survey results. So what I mean by that is a couple of different things. First and foremost, 46% of marketers say they have little to no transparency into total spend or breakdown of spend by channel across their brand portfolio. Seems super simple that you'd be able to see at your fingertips at any point what's being spent by channel, by brand, but still a lot of people don't have that visibility. Additionally, more than half of them say they have little to no transparency into which solution is working best. And in a world where there's growing buying fragmentation, like we touched on, with multiple tools people are using, multiple solutions, each of them with their own unique data silo, it becomes really important to be able to find out which one is working the best. So when you're trying to drive ROI down for your brand, it's not just, hey, I got CPCs or CPAs down 10%, good job ROI. What really helps move the needle is, hey, I should stop licensing this tool because I know this other one is working better. That will save me huge chunks of money in marketing technology costs, which really helps the bottom line ROI of an overall brand portfolio. So finding out what solution is working best, super critical, and a lens of transparency people aren't really thinking about today, but certainly have a growing need for it. And then lastly, again, more than half have little to no transparency into the dollars spent on specific brands in their portfolio. So they might be able to see across everything I spent X, but they don't have the ability to dig into each individual brand and start not only comparing and contrasting, but learning the unique trends and learnings that they could apply to other campaigns across their entire portfolio. In addition to spend transparency, which is certainly just one type of transparency, there's also a need for performance transparency. It's not just dollars being spent, but it's also what those dollars are yielding in marketing. So for instance, we have over 56% say they have little to no transparency into social advertising performance trends and ROI. So that means at any given time, they don't know exactly how they're performing, they don't know their ROI, they're relying maybe on a wrap-up report they get 6 weeks after a campaign, maybe it's a little more frequent, but it's certainly not what anyone would call a transparent view into the performance of those campaigns, which is a critical learning to have at your fingertips. Additionally, more than 60% have little to no transparency into how they're performing against benchmarks. The concept of benchmarks is something we hear all the time from our clients and why we really focus on that here at Unified. We want to make sure that brands can not only see how they're doing in real time, but compare it to something so they have the context of what, say, 5 conversions means today. Is that good? Is that bad? How does that compare to my previous benchmark? So the fact that 60% of people said, I have no transparency into how I'm performing against benchmarks is a little bit scary. And also 60% said that they had no way to easily share the performance analytics with other teams. Now, in a world where we have this growing buying fragmentation of different tools and teams being plugged in, it's super critical to be able to share information with the different teams in an easy and effective way. That's how everyone gets on the same page. That's how you can innovate faster, and that's how you can make adjustments to your campaigns that really move the needle. For instance, think about a creative agency that is building amazing creative, handing it to a media agency, and the media agency is placing it in effective campaigns. That's a pretty cut and dry normal situation for a brand that has a major agency. But the creative agency is often left out of the loop. They're either reliant on a wrap-up report way after the campaign ended, or they don't get insights at all, and that's no way to then develop better creative for the next campaign. So having the ability to easily share performance with all the different factions and different teams that make up your squad that you're going to social advertising war with, whether it's strategic agencies, creative agencies, media agencies, measurement agencies, the ability to share across all of them is critical. So, because of all of those needs, and because of that trend of growing buying fragmentation and the need for transparency, which could solve it all, that's where BI for social advertising comes in. BI, meaning business intelligence, really focuses on enabling that level of transparency that people so desperately need and are really starting to recognize that they need. And that's why it really became apparent in the survey results that 2017 is the tipping point for business intelligence in social advertising. Specifically, there's a lot of different facets of that. The first being a vital change in infrastructure. So think about 6 in 10 marketers said that they anticipate changing their social data management infrastructure this year in 2017. That means they recognize the foundation of which they are ingesting their data, managing it, normalizing it, enriching it, is not good enough for what they need. And so more than half of them plan on changing that to create a better foundation moving forward. Additionally, we had a third of them who are not leveraging social BI today raise their hand very candidly and say, I know I am behind the curve and that I need to catch up. So people are certainly aware of the need and know that if they don't implement something like BI for social advertising soon, it can certainly leave them behind their competitors. And that's why, again, we feel 2017 is certainly pointing towards a tipping point there. Interestingly enough, when we dissected who actually is doing social business intelligence really well right now, there were some out there, but it was a very small minority. In fact, only 8% of marketers called themselves trailblazers, which was our term for the people who were really ahead of the pack in social BI. And that basically indicates there's a ton of room for growth in 2017. You may have this small 8% making up the trailblazer group, but that leaves another 92% who, as we just learned, consider themselves behind the curve. And interestingly enough, when we dug into this, all of those trailblazers, they were the ones who were the most vocal about the value of social BI, saying that it really helps them on an everyday basis and it helps them really move the needle for their ROI. So the people who are actually ahead of the curve are already singing the praises of this. Again, another indicator that others will learn from them, and that 2017 will be the tipping point for social BI. As I mentioned, trailblazers, 78% of them said they saw great value in social BI and expect their budget to increase in 2017. Because it's one thing to see value, it's another thing to see value and want to double down and then increase your budget. So people are very easily justifying their investments in this type of tool because it's having such an impact, not on a single campaign, not on a single targeting group, and not even on a single brand in a portfolio, but across an arc of an entire brand portfolio across now many different social channels. So we also wanted to point out some success stories of our own clients who are tapping into social BI, who might consider themselves trailblazers in that minority, hopefully a growing minority, and what we predict will be a growing minority in 2017. We work with a lot of different brands across a lot of different verticals, and we wanted to highlight a couple of them in different facets that we think might help. So for instance, we work with a global CPG beverage brand. And when we work with them, to start, there was a huge data problem, specifically a lot of what we talked about. They had a massive data exhaust that was sitting in all different types of data silos, and there was no way to normalize and enrich that data so that they could make it usable. To give you a sense of the scale of that, they have 70 different sub-brands across 13 different countries in the world. That's a lot of data to map together for them to then pipe into some kind of visualization and make sense of. And when we dug a little bit further, again to give you a sense of scale, just one brand in just the US, when you lifted under the hood, had 26 different ad accounts attached to it and 7 different buying teams touching it. So when we talk about that buying fragmentation, this is a perfect example of, hey, just one brand in just one country had this type of makeup under the hood. This is not an uncommon story. A lot of global brands certainly have similar stories and the need to normalize and index that data together, which is something that we help this specific client with all the time. Additionally, switching gears to a global automotive brand, this specific case study really focuses on the point we touched on about sharing intelligence. So in this case, through our Connected Intelligence product, the brand effortlessly plugged in their creative agency into our platform, streamlining those teams in real time. So prior to that type of streamlined approach, you had kind of what I described before. Brand at the center had hired a media agency and a creative agency, kind of talked, kind of didn't, weren't sharing performance. Certainly no way to impact and improve creative, basically using actual analytics. But with an optimal flow, with everyone connected into the same place, and with the ability for the brand to share not just everything, but just the pieces that are relevant to the creative agency, because they don't want to have to deal with that mountain of information either, then it becomes very usable for each party. And it was super helpful for this specific automotive brand, where they were now all across the entire brand portfolio on the same page. And that portfolio was quite substantial. It was 3 years of data and over $40 million in social advertising spend. One more that I think is super important to highlight really illustrates the concept of data continuity. So it's not only having your data in name alone, but having your data and knowing that you indeed have your data. As we talked about in the previous case study, when you lift under the hood of a brand and what they're doing on social, a lot of times you have lots of different ad accounts and teams touching it. And so with each of those having their own data silo, it becomes a question of who owns that data silo. What I mean by that is if you wanted to substitute, plug in a new tool for an old tool, or switch agencies, which happens from time to time, you want to make sure that you, the brand at the center of it, have that continuity of that data. So in this case, this was a global technology brand, certainly a long-standing customers of ours, over 5 years. It's a huge brand with 30 different sub-brands, over $120 million in ad spend. Just so happened that they had changed agency of record 3 times throughout that 5-year span. And with the unified platform, ingesting, normalizing, enriching that data, and more importantly, giving them the security and assurance that it is indeed their data, they had no break in data continuity. They weren't hitting up old agencies, trying to ask them to send over spreadsheets of old benchmarks, and this is an actual critical use case that a lot of people are facing in the market. Lastly, certainly helpful for agencies as well. This is a major media agency we work with where we actually did the math out with them and calculated on average across their 16 different brands in their agency, they were using over 150 Excel sheets a year, and that's just for their social advertising. So that is what they were having to export out of each data silo and each tool that they were using, and with no visualization layer, and try and stitch together, which just sounds crazy to me. But they were able to replace that with one business intelligence platform, which really speaks to the power of what business intelligence is and how it can not only replace this volume of spreadsheets, but also eliminate the potential human error that is certainly prone to spreadsheets in the world. So that's pretty much it. We went through the survey results. We looked at some success stories of brands who might be trailblazers. Just to leave you again with what Unified is all about, we are purpose-built business intelligence specifically for social advertising. We are laser focused on this fastest growing segment of the media mix. And at the end of the day, we do 3 things. Your data is collected and enriched, adding that context and purpose to drive business intelligence for you in multiple forms. It could be total social advertising transparency. It could be a better way to do enhanced investment management. It could be analytics at any altitude, deeper real-time audience insights, and as we talked about with those fragmented teams, streamlined connected intelligence. That's the power, not just of Unified, forget that for a second, but of business intelligence in the social advertising ecosystem. The ability to know exactly what's going on at the time you need to make a decision and invite your teams into the decision-making process. So, hopefully that was a helpful webinar. You learned a little something today. That's what we always try and achieve here. If you're interested in the long-form research study that this was an excerpt of, you can visit our website or our social channels where it's always being promoted, and you can find it. Or you can contact marketing@unified.com and email us any questions, or if you want to access that long-form case study, happy to send it your way. So with that, I'm going to give the last 5 minutes to questions from the panel and address anything that comes in. Feel free to type them in the chat box, and I will start with the first couple. First question, can you please break down the difference between enriched data and raw data? What is really the difference? Okay, great question. So enriched data is basically a better way to use your data. So think of raw data as raw ingredients. It's not yet a cake, but you still have flour and sugar and butter, and I'm not a baker, I assume whatever else goes into a cake. Enriched data is the culmination of all of those things, the normalizing of all of those things, the enrichment of all of those things into the finished product. So when we talk about it in terms of social advertising, it's basically adding 2 things at the end of the day: context and purpose. So what do we mean by that? Let's take an example. Let's say you got 20 conversions today. That is a raw data stat. Congratulations, you got 20 conversions today. Is that good? Is that bad? Is that amazing? Is that terrible? You have no context and no purpose to do with that. So when you enrich that data, which our platform does, it adds the who, the what, the where, the when, the why, and the how to those 20 conversions. So you might learn 80% came from Facebook, 10% came from this tool versus 90% came from this other tool, it was this creative, it was this targeting group, it compares to your historical benchmark this way, it was shared with your creative agency so they know to use that type of creative moving forward. It gives the context to what those 20 conversions are, and it allows you to give them purpose and action, in other words. So hopefully that helps answer that question. Next question, what is the difference between large business intelligence platforms like Domo or Tableau and what you've described here? It's a great question. So in the business intelligence segment out in the world, there's a lot of big companies out there. Domo and Tableau are great examples that were brought up. Those types of companies are not solely focused on social advertising. In fact, if you're a healthcare company, a legal company, a marketing company, a medical company, whatever it is, they have great data visualizations for whatever your data is. So they act as, really impactful visualization layers, but they lack the direct connection into the social networks that someone who really needs this type of solution for social advertising would need. So for instance, if you wanted to actually pull in all of your Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, Pinterest data, you would need someone who has access to all of those advertising APIs, which we have. We're one of 4 companies in the world with that level of API access. Hopefully that helps illustrate that. And last question. I think we have time for 1 or 2 more. Next question, do you think the walled gardens of social will ever go away? Great question. It's interesting when you look at the trajectory of social media in comparison to other channels that are a little bit more mature, things like search and display, right? Social had the benefit of learning from all of those different channels before it became a thing, specifically Facebook, which really was kind of the market leader that others learned from as well. And so what they learned is that instead of having, a cookie that can translate across websites, for instance, in display, we really want to value and prioritize our specific platform. So for them to pull down the walls of that walled garden doesn't make a ton of sense. And the trends don't point to it going away anytime soon, which is why it's super critical for a marketer to have a centralized system where they can plug in each of these walled gardens, but not feel the pain of them, right? Plug in each of those walled gardens, have that data collected, normalized, and displayed into impactful, intelligent reports that you can make sense of, instead of having to dive into each walled garden one at a time. Because that trend is certainly not going away, and you're seeing it with even new players in the space like Snapchat and Pinterest. They're following suit, and each of them is, in fact, their own walled garden. Sorry to use the term walled garden so many times. Last question. Is the data exhaust from Facebook really that large? Well, whenever I get this question, I point to one of my favorite stats, which is that in a single day, Facebook generates 500 times the amount of data as the New York Stock Exchange. And the New York Stock Exchange is where there's a lot of money and a lot of eyeballs. So yeah, I think it's safe to say that social has a massive data exhaust that really is difficult for marketers to wrap their hands around, and why we feel business intelligence solutions can certainly help there. Cool. Well, it doesn't look like there's any more questions. Thank you guys so much for joining the webinar. Again, feel free to check out the full research paper on our website, or contact marketing@Unified for any follow-up questions that you might have, or access to any of our materials, and we hope it helped you out. Thanks a lot. Take care.